Hi, thanks for joining us. Today, I will be interviewing my good friend, writer, painter, futurist by the name of Mark David Bailey. He happened to inspire this podcast when last year, 2020, he put out an open communication requesting contributors to a follow up that he would compile to Vinay Gupta's 2010 The Future We Deserve essay compilation. I thought it was brilliant, and so I adapted it into this podcast. I hope you enjoy what Mark has to say on these subjects.
Welcome to Better Futures.
So, Mark, can you please tell us how you first came across The Future We Deserve?
I've been keeping track of Vinay Gupta for a long time and just seeing kind of what he was up to in the futurism world. And then when he came out with the idea for the collaborative book, The Future We Deserve, I thought it was interesting. And so that's how I came across it.
Can you tell us more about futurism, how you became involved in it, and some of your work in the field?
My getting into futurism came from my book, Fixing Broken Robots. Through that book, I got into the futurism community. Now, typically, what it has to do with is looking at possible and probable futures and then seeing how you can make changes now to move towards desirable futures as opposed to undesirable ones.
What aspects of our present circumstances are leading us towards potential negative outcomes?
I think the momentum of the total global capitalist structure is the biggest thing leading us towards undesirable outcomes.
Are these undesirable outcomes foreseen in the well-known narrative of climate change and in the precarious economic situation of the working class?
I mean, climate change is a big one. The precarity of the underclass is a big one. Even not including climate change, the destruction of our food infrastructure, like the fish disappearing, the topsoil disappearing, those things are, I think, critical issues.
Interesting. I'm starting to see how habitat destruction due to climate change is at least concurrent with the increasing inability of human beings to provide for themselves outside of a market.
Or even within a market. I mean, 90% of the fish are gone.
Wow. Still, I'm wondering, maybe it's just out of hopeful desperation, but can you envision a future still possible for us to achieve that includes circumstances that humanity actually does deserve?
I can, for a few reasons. One, we're looking at a major depopulation situation over the next 100 years. So there'll be fewer people in 100 years than there are now, no matter what, just because of our declining fertility and other factors. So that means there's less pressure on existing systems if there are fewer people. The pressures, however, change because even though we'll have fewer people, a larger percentage of those people are going to be older and require more care. So where I see the most hope is in a couple of areas. One is innovation. I don't mean the crackpot geoengineering stuff that you hear in the big science headlines. I mean stuff like coral reefs being rebuilt by artificial means, which is already happening off the coast of Florida. Things like that in all sectors across the board that are happening that I think at least open the window to a better future than you might expect.
Well, thank you for saying so. I'm personally glad that there is the possibility for a future that might exceed our expectations. Can you think of any barriers between ourselves and the benefits that we might derive from that innovation?
Yeah, I see two. One is the global control regime, which is comprised of business and government working together to control populations and extract value from them. Two is the difficulty that many people have with change because things are changing so quickly and they're going to change much more quickly in the coming years. And a lot of people are going to be psychologically inequipped to navigate that change effectively. If the control regime suddenly became ideal, there would still be a problem with people having a hard time with change.
I understand. This control regime that you talk about, with business and state interests behind it, do you imagine they find some profit in people's fear of change, or else how might they play off it if they do at all?
Some do, but a lot of them are trying to push change in a specific direction. For example, Bill Gates, he's the largest owner of farmland in the country right now. When COVID hit, he bought up all the fucking farmland. And so Gates is a huge proponent of artificial meat, and him and people like him are pushing an agenda of eliminating meat from the diet as opposed to changing our farming practices to make them more sustainable. Because there are ways to do sustainable meat that don't negatively impact climate change. They're actually carbon sink. But doing those things is different than the industrial farming infrastructure tends to facilitate. So rather than changing in one way, which would be to do more sustainable agriculture, Gates and people like him are trying to turn agriculture more industrial, more high tech, and ultimately less healthy for both people and the environment, but it keeps them in power.
I see now absolutely how it works toward a certain vision of the future, and how it also plays upon a certain fear of change in the population with regard to modifying food supplies.
Right.
If that's the case, then it seems to me that Bill Gates' vision of the future not only plays off the fear of change within the larger population, but is also a structural expression of the fear of change within the system of industrial farming itself.
Right.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your views with us today, and for contributing to our species' ongoing discussion about the issues we face and the improvements that we might make to our world.